We're back with our third installment of Cheese and Packers. Chris Barriere, Kelly Price, and happy to be joined once again by our Packers insider from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Michael Cohen. Mike, good to see you on the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's fun now that football's here.
Absolutely. Football's here, my friend. We got lots of cheese to eat and lots of football to talk about. The Packers training camp's in full swing. The guys are in full pads, and one group that benefits probably more than anybody else is the new running back core. What have you seen from the running game so far?
Yeah, Saturday was a really big day for the running backs, and Mike McCarthy pretty much said that once the pads go on, that's when you can find out what these guys can really do. And it's really important for them for a couple of reasons. First, in addition to all their blocking assignments, they have to protect Aaron Rodgers. That's really important. So they have to be able to figure out which guys can protect and which guys can't. And then second of all, any of those guys that can stay on the field all three downs, so the guys that can pass, catch, and block, gives the Packers the ability to access that no huddle, that up tempo that makes them so dangerous. So it's huge to figure out not only which guys can run, but which guys can do everything else too.
The biggest thing I think there from two is Ty Montgomery. What did you see from his pass protection? He said to us in an interview, he was like, look, I'm not going to apologize for things I don't know how to do yet. Is he there? Is he ready for that role?
No, he's not ready yet, and that's going to be something to watch, especially in the exhibition games. This is a guy that was basically thrown in the fire partway through the season last year when Eddie Lacy and James Starks had injury problems. So he's really doing this for the very first time, and I think he took 5 reps in the pass protection drill, and 3 of them were not very pretty to look at. So this is a guy that has some strides to make and some improvements to make, and to his credit, he knows that that's the case, and he's not necessarily going to be defensive about it.
Another key on offense is going to be the tight end group. Obviously, that's a group that's gone through a lot of changes this offseason. They add Martellus Bennett and Lance Kendricks, so that top trio looks a lot different. 21 years of combined experience, though. What have you seen from them, or what are you expecting to see from them throughout camp?
So this gives the Packers offense a totally different dimension. And it's not to say that they didn't have tight ends that were capable in the past, but the fact that they have 3 guys that all have sort of 3 distinct skill sets allows Mike McCarthy to have a lot more freedom. So you look at Martellus Bennett. He's a great receiver, but he's also the best blocker and arguably the best blocking tight end in the league. So that's a huge asset there. Lance Kendricks is a guy that can line up all over the formation. He can line up in the slot. He can line up in the backfield as a fullback, or he can be that traditional tight end. And then Richard Rodgers has tremendous hands, and so he's a guy that's not going to beat you with athleticism necessarily, but if you get down into the red zone and you need a catch in tight spaces, the tight ends coach Brian Angelicchio says Rodgers' hands are tremendous.
That's great. A guy like Martellus Bennett, sharp guy, perhaps as sharp as this Wisconsin sharp cheddar that we see here. One thing, there was a brief scare the other day in practice. Marty fell down in a non-contract drill, held his ankle a little bit, he got up, hobbled off, had it taped up. Everything okay? Anything to be concerned about there?
No, nothing to be concerned about. We asked him about it after practice, and he said it's just football stuff. This is the type of situation where if it was anything remotely serious, he wouldn't have gone back on the field. So he's fine, he's good to go, and he should be out there on Monday again.
Switching gears to the defense, the secondary has a totally new look as well for the Packers. What's going to make them better in this department? Because obviously they need to improve from last season.
I think speed is the #1 thing that's going to help them there, and that's part of the reason why they drafted Josh Jones, a rookie safety who has the ability to not only be one of the strongest and biggest players in that unit, but also the fastest. And then you look at guys like Kentrell Bryce, who mixed in toward the end of last season, another guy that runs in the 4.4 range, and then of course Kevin King, the rookie cornerback, another guy in the 4.4 range that gives you height and speed. So it was very clear after some of the painful losses, especially Atlanta in the NFC Championship game, that this defense needs speed, and that was addressed in the secondary.
Michael, I'd like to call your attention to our middle cheese here. This is the Colby Jack, and I'll tell you what, it's a little spicy. It packs a punch. It brings a hit. And you know who else can bring the hit? Is Josh Jones. We saw it in practice. The guy leveled fellow rookie Malachi Dupree. Some of the guys took note of that, Richard Rodgers in particular, but is it such a bad thing when you see a guy hit somebody like that?
I think it depends who you ask. If you ask Mike Daniels, who's sort of that smash mouth leader, he'll say, well, this is exactly what we thought he was going to be, a guy that's going to come in and be really physical. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad sign.
Well, let me ask you this. Is he going to be a difference maker for the Packers this year?
He certainly has the potential to be, and I think the faster he is able to get onto the field, in other words, the sooner the coaches trust him, the better this defense will be, because he gives them a physical presence that pretty much only Morgan Burnett can match in terms of the ability to play safety and also move up a little bit into the box and play sort of that hybrid linebacker. But different from Burnett, he has speed, and the fact that he's one of the bigger guys in the secondary, it doesn't take away from the fact that he ran 4.41 and he's still the fastest guy in the secondary regardless of his size.
Sure.
Then going to kind of the special teams, something that can get overlooked. 2 questions for you here. #1, is the young punting core kind of an issue. And number two, the return game. We talked to Randall Cobb. He wants it, but they'll keep him probably limited just to be a healthier receiver. And then Trevor Davis, is in that spot, but he hasn't super impressed us so far.
Yeah, so there's a couple layers there. Starting with the new long snapper Derek Hart and the new punter Justin Vogel. Both of those guys are coming into situations where it's very rare in the NFL. They were basically handed keys as rookies and said, if you do this well over the next 4 or 5 weeks, the job's yours. It's as simple as that. You don't have to beat anyone. We're going to give you a chance to just have it. And so I think Vogel's performed pretty well, and Hart has performed adamantly as well. So I think so far those guys are off to good starts. And then you look at the return game, Micah Hyde was the guy that handled a lot of the punt returns for the Packers over the last 3-4 years. And so now they're looking at Trevor Davis versus Randall Cobb. I think if the Packers had their druthers, they would really like Trevor Davis to win that job, not only because he's a little bit faster than Cobb, but also because he's less important to the offense than Cobb is, like you mentioned, Kelly. And so the more Cobb is back there, the more he's exposed, the more dangerous it is, and the more you might lose on offense. But Cobb said he really wants that job, and he's asked the coaches to let him have it.
He seems a little salty that he didn't get it. I mean, he said this is not my decision, that I'm not back there, but he has been a little bit fragile.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a guy that, whether he can't really control his size, and the fact that he's playing a big man's sport in a little man's body, he's going to get knocked up at times. And so, the majority of his injuries have come at receiver, even though he has done some returning in the past. But it's a game of odds, and the more times you're out there facing a head-on rush, the more likely you are to get injured. And so I think that Cobb can certainly do it, and he might even be able to do it better than Trevor Davis, you can argue. But I think for the integrity of the offense, they'd rather keep him away from there as much as possible.
Moving forward, first week is in the books, orientation kind of complete. What do we want to see now moving into the second week of training camp?
Yeah, so there's various checkpoints along the way that Mike McCarthy and his staff use as benchmarks for certain days they want to get certain things accomplished by. And you look at the exhibition games, of course. In the past, there was the cut down to 75, and one of the key ones is family night. It might sound silly because it is just a practice, but Saturday night when the Packers go into Lambeau Field for their big practice in front of 75,000 people, it's a huge chance for them to evaluate the younger guys and look at their composure and see how they handle a big stage with lots of lights, with screaming fans, because up until this point it's been a very isolated environment where they install the plays, they go through the playbook. Now it's applying that in a quote-unquote game-like setting where you have all the distractions that can possibly get in the way.
It's a fun time to be in Green Bay. Football is back. There's lots to talk about, and we still got lots of cheese to eat. Michael, thanks so much for joining us, and please help yourself to some cheese.